Hey guys, tonight we're starting somewhere a little wet. Not your usual cozy medieval bed or creaky monastery hallway, no. Tonight we begin knee-deep in North Sea muck, in a place that technically isn't a place anymore. If you were standing there right now, you wouldn't see a town or even ruins. Just endless, flat gray mud stretching to the horizon, with the water creeping in behind you like it's trying to remember what it swallowed. And if you listen closely, really closely, you might hear something strange. Not wind, not waves, but bells. Church bells, tolling softly, impossibly, from somewhere underneath. You wouldn't last long out there, honestly. The tides rise fast. The ground sucks at your feet. And the fog? It doesn't just blur your vision, it makes you forget which way you came from. Tourists have wandered off and been swallowed whole. So, don't forget your medieval GPS. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? Midnight in Minnesota? 3 a.m. in Manila? Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're walking across the Wadden Sea. No, not swimming, not sailing, just walking across something called a tidal flat, one of the eeriest landscapes Europe has to offer. For a few precious hours every day, the sea simply leaves. It pulls back like a breath held too long, revealing a glistening expanse of wet sand and clay. Mussels squirm, tiny fish panic, and for a little while, the bones of lost cities peek out to see the sun again. That's where you are now. At least you think so. The mud grabs at your boots. Seawater sloshes around your ankles, even though you're still miles from the current shoreline. The horizon is a smear of gray sky and sea blending into one enormous sheet of steel. Behind you, faint and ghost-like, you can just make out the modern German coast. Ahead of you, nothing but wind, salt, and a whole lot of squelching. And then you hear it. Dong. One note, low and round. Then another, and another. It doesn't sound like it's coming from the sky or the wind. It's coming from below, as if something deep beneath the mud is trying to speak. Maybe warn you, maybe call you home. The bells of Rungholt. You've heard the name before, maybe in a travel blog or buried in the appendix of a documentary no one finished watching. Rungholt, a city lost to the sea in a single day, swallowed whole by a great flood in the year 1362. Sometimes called the Atlantis of the North. More often, a cautionary tale. But standing here, listening to those muffled tones rise through your feet, it doesn't feel like legend. It feels like something's still alive down there, waiting. And maybe that's why no one builds here anymore. Not just because of the tide, but because the ground remembers. In the Middle Ages, the people of Rungholt lived rich. Like, rich. Not royal, but not far off. The city sat near the coast of what's now Schleswig-Holstein, and its wealth came from something deceptively simple: salt. Back then, salt was gold. Not in flavor, but in function. Salt preserved meat, cured fish, cleaned wounds, and even paid soldiers. Rungholt's marshlands were perfect for harvesting it. They had salt pans stretching for miles. And behind those, churches, storehouses, taverns, homes with tile roofs and painted windows. More than 1,000 people, maybe 2,000 or 3,000, depending on which historian you trust. And oh, they were proud of it. Too proud, some said. There's a tale, probably apocryphal, but delicious nonetheless, about a priest who visited Rungholt and was scandalized by what he saw. Gold chalices overflowing, people getting drunk on communion wine, pigs being paraded through churches wearing bishop hats. That kind of proud. Of course, historians still argue about that. Some say the stories of their decadence were moral tales invented after the fact. punishment for pride and all that. But others think there's a kernel of truth. That Rungholt was, for a brief time, the jewel of the Frisian coast, and the people there knew it. But pride doesn't hold back the sea. The flood came on the night of January 16, 1362. Locals called it the Groot Mandrank, the Great Drowning of Men. It wasn't just one town that vanished. Hundreds of settlements were flattened by the storm surge. But Rungholt was special because it didn't just vanish. It sank. Or at least that's what people say. You reach a spot where the mud seems firmer. Someone's been here recently. There are faint footprints, half erased by the wind. You crouch, brushing aside the top layer of muck, and spot something hard. Piece of brick. Or maybe tile. Glazed red, just enough to catch the fading light. You rub it between your fingers. The texture's wrong for nature. Someone fired this. Someone built something with it. Maybe a wall. Maybe an altar. Maybe both. The bells toll again. Or maybe it's just your heartbeat. It's hard to tell. People have been searching for Rungholt for centuries. Not the city itself, it's pretty clear it's gone, but for its ghost. In the 1920s, a German archaeologist named Andreas Busch discovered remains buried beneath the tidal flats near the island of Pellworm. Bits of pottery, foundations, wooden posts that had no business being that far underwater. He mapped it all, and then the sea took it back. Every so often, it gives up another clue. Pewter spoon. A coin stamped with the year 1359. A fragment of a church bell with an inscription in Latin so corroded you can only guess at the prayer. These objects surface like dreams, and then they vanish again. And that's what makes Rungholt so haunting. It's not just the tragedy, it's the timing. 1362 wasn't just any year. Europe was still reeling from the Black Death. The 100 Years' War had begun to simmer. And in the middle of all this, a rich, thriving, arrogant little town got slapped off the map by a single storm. Coincidence? Divine retribution? Climate change? You guessed it, historians still argue about that. Your foot slips into a deeper pocket of mud and you stumble forward, catching yourself on your hands. Cold, wet, and slightly humiliated, you look up, and there, barely poking through the mire, is something strange. A circle. Metal. Thin and cracked. You wipe it off. A bell fragment? No, a buckle. You hold it up. It's still attached to a strip of leather, black and tough as bone. Maybe from a shoe. Maybe from a belt. You imagine someone standing here once, wind whipping their cloak, calling to someone already lost. And then the sea rose. And it rose so fast, according to chronicles, that whole families were swept away in their sleep. The water hit just after midnight. Walls crumbled. Livestock screamed. Some tried to flee to churches like that would help. Others climbed rooftops only to be dragged off by waves taller than barns. There's a line from one of the only surviving accounts that sticks with you. The bells rang as the tower sank. Imagine that. You're in the choir loft, holding onto the railing, and the floor beneath you starts to tilt. Water pours in through the stained glass. You can't hear the wind anymore because the sound of the bell is all-consuming. One long, endless toll. And then silence. Back in the present, your phone buzzes. The tide's turning. You've got maybe 40 minutes before the flats become sea again. You look down at the mud where you found the buckle. You bury it gently, not because you're superstitious, just respectful. You turn around and start walking, boots sucking at every step, the sound of the bells getting fainter and fainter. They're not done with you, not yet. You're still thinking about those bells. It's hard not to, even as you leave the tidal flats behind. Boots soaked, pants ruined, face windburned. You can still feel them in your chest, not just as sound, but as pressure, like a memory that doesn't belong to you, refusing to let go. You tell yourself it's just your imagination. The brain playing tricks. Auditory pareidolia. That's the term, right? Hearing patterns in randomness. Like hearing voices in the wind or music in an old radiator. Totally normal. Totally. But as you drive inland along the low, winding roads of northern Germany, you keep glancing in the rearview mirror. The sea isn't chasing you. Not tonight. But it's waiting. You can feel it. And tonight's story isn't done with the sea either. Not yet. Because we need to talk about the bell. The one that allegedly still rings beneath the waves. It's one of the strangest and most persistent legends tied to Rungholt. A sunken church whose bell continues to toll, even centuries after it sank. Locals swear they've heard it, not always with their ears, sometimes just as a low vibration in their feet or a strange pulse in the soles of their boats. Every few years, a new witness appears, a tourist walking along the flats at dusk, a fisherman casting nets where he probably shouldn't, a scientist with instruments that recorded something they can't explain. It's always the same story. A single solemn bell, sounding from below, with no visible source. You scoff, or maybe you don't. Maybe, deep down, you kind of want it to be true. Because if that bell's still ringing, it means something's still down there. And it means someone or something is still listening. There's an old woman in Pellworm who once said something strange. You overheard it in a cafe, half lost in the clatter of teacups and chatter. She was talking to someone, her niece, maybe about Rungholt. She said, "If you hear the bell once, it's luck. Twice, you should turn back. 3 times, and you're already beneath it." She laughed when she said it, but it didn't sound like a joke. And Pellworm, by the way, is key to all this. The modern island sits close to where Rungholt supposedly stood. It's low, flat, ringed with dikes and crisscrossed with sheep pastures. Not exactly where you'd expect to find one of the most haunted legends in German history. But dig a few feet into the soil and you start to hit things that shouldn't be there. Bricks, bones, wooden beams so old they crumble in your fingers. In 2001, a team of researchers brought out ground-penetrating radar. What they found was staggering: foundations, multiple ones, buried deep beneath layers of sediment, lined up like the grid of a medieval town. Streets, cellars, even the base of what might have been a tower. But here's the thing. The structures weren't where they were supposed to be. Old maps place Rungholt much farther east, closer to where the sea is now, which means either the sea took it and then moved again, or someone moved the maps. And historians, bless them, still argue about that. Some claim the church bell story is a pure fabrication, just folklore stitched together from post-flood trauma. Others argue that sound travels differently in the tidal flats, bouncing and echoing in weird, spooky ways. And still others believe there really was a bell, submerged in the mud, perfectly intact for decades, maybe centuries, until one day it simply rusted to silence. Unless it didn't, you pull over near an old dike. It's barely lit, just a single bulb flickering over a weathered sign that reads, Sturmflutgedenkstein, 1362, Storm Flood Memorial. You walk closer. The plaque tells a simple story. Here stood the village of Rungholt, destroyed in the Great Flood of January 16, 1362. All lives lost. Beneath it, a quote in Latin, Memento fluctus, memento superbium. Remember the waves. Remember the pride. You sit there for a moment, in the hush of coastal night, listening. And then it happens again. Dong. It's distant, maybe far out toward the flats, maybe underground, but it's there. A single round note. You don't move, just listen. Nothing else follows. No echo, no seagulls startled into flight, no wind. It's like the bell knows you're there. You reach into your pocket and pull out your phone. Not to take a picture, no one would believe it anyway, but to record the silence. The phone hums with wind, maybe picks up a dog bark a mile away. But no bell, because it never happens when the mic is on. They say the bell only rings for those who need to hear it, or those who are about to join it. Okay, maybe that part's a little dramatic, but so is the legend. One account from the 1600s, written by a preacher named Johann Buxtehude, described a fishing crew that anchored too close to the flats. They said they felt the ground beneath their boat vibrate. Then the anchor chain went taut, snagged on something solid. When they pulled it up, there was no hook, just a piece of bronze shaped like a tongue. Not a human tongue, a bell's tongue. They sold it to a blacksmith and never went back. Another tale tells of a child who dreamed of a flooded church weeks before his village was destroyed by a lesser flood in 1634. He claimed to have seen people kneeling underwater, still praying, their hair floating like kelp. In the dream, one of them turned and looked at him. The boy never spoke again. You exhale slowly. Goosebumps rise on your arms. You're starting to understand why people don't stay long out here after dark. And the bell, well, it keeps tolling. Or maybe it's not a bell. Maybe it's the memory of a bell. Some frequencies don't die, they just get buried. Echoes trapped in wet stone and salt. You stand up and stretch. The air smells like fish and iron and something old, like the back of a church closet that's never been opened. It's getting late. Time to head back. You get in your car, drive in silence, letting the road take you further inland. But you know the bell isn't done. You heard it twice, and if it rings again, well, that's not your problem yet. You're trying not to check your rearview mirror again. You've already done it 6 times in the last kilometer, and logically, you know there's nothing there. No ancient church tower rising out of the floodplain. No ghostly figure in a drowned priest's robes hitchhiking inland. Just darkness, headlights, and the occasional suicidal moth. But your brain doesn't want logic right now. It wants reassurance. Because even though you've put solid ground between yourself and the Wadden Sea, something still clings to your skin. Not mud, not salt. The feeling, like the weight of a memory that doesn't belong to you. Heavy, wet, bell-shaped. You pass the sign Hambrook. 2 kilometers. A small village. You weren't planning to stop, but you're tired, and your boots are still squishing every time you move your toes. You could use a pub, or a stiff drink, or preferably both at once. So you take the exit, letting the car crawl past squat brick houses and sleepy streetlights. And that's when you notice the cemetery. It's small, walled in, not creepy exactly, just quiet, the way northern cemeteries always are. Stones arranged like teeth in a crooked grin, half covered in moss. You almost drive past without thinking, but something catches your eye. A stone, flat, wide, much older than the others. No name, just a single word carved into the middle in Gothic script. Rungholt. You brake, hard, and then you're backing up, parked, engine off. You step out of the car, and the night air hits you like a whisper, cold and still, not a breeze. Not even a leaf rustling, like the world is holding its breath. The stone is real, old but not ancient, probably placed there sometime in the 1800s. A memorial, maybe. Someone wanted to remember. But what's odd, what really gets under your skin is the lack of detail. No date, no explanation, just that single half-forgotten name. It's like someone tried to mark a grave for a city. Or maybe tried to appease something restless. You lean in. There's something etched faintly near the bottom. Smaller, as if added later. Heard thrice. Lost once. That again. You step back, glance around. Still no wind. Still no sound. Still no bell. Maybe that's good. Back in the car, you try to shake it off, but your mind keeps tugging at loose threads. Rungholt, drowned city, mysterious bells, and now a nameless stone in a town 2 hours from the coast. So what gives? You start digging, metaphorically this time. The next day, you check into a small guest house with Wi-Fi and a weird number of crucifixes. Over coffee and dry toast, you crack open your laptop and fall into the strangest rabbit hole you've seen in years. Apparently, that grave marker isn't unique. There are dozens of them, scattered across the region. All different shapes, all with the same single word, Rungholt. Some say heard once, seen never. Others say 3 bells for the living, 1 for the dead. No one claims responsibility for placing them. They just appeared. People assume they're part of an art project or an old regional tradition, but no one has ever taken credit. And anytime a village council tries to remove one, it gets mysteriously returned, sometimes with an extra phrase carved in. One stone was found with this scratched into its side. They don't forgive. Okay, so maybe the bell legend goes deeper than a ghost story. You find a scanned document in a digitized regional archive. It's a sermon, handwritten in 1374, by a traveling Dominican friar. The Latin is scratchy, but translated, it reads, "The people of the drowned town walked in sin and slept in luxury. But when the waters came, they did not cry for mercy. They sang, and the bells rang with them, not for warning, but joy." Weird. The friar adds something chilling in the margin. "I walked there after. The tower was gone. The sea was quiet, but still I heard the bell, as though the deep itself remembered." Even more weird, that document was found not near the sea, but inland, in a monastery a full day's ride away from the coast. Monks who never saw the ocean, writing about a town they should have known nothing about. So how did they know what the bells sounded like? How did they know the people were singing? And then comes the theory, one you've seen whispered on forums and in footnotes but never in any mainstream history book. Rungholt didn't just drown. It got buried. Not by water, by sound. There's a belief, more mystical than scientific, that some places can record events, like stone cassette tapes, events so loud, so emotional, so traumatic, they leave an impression on the land itself. And under just the right conditions, say, a full moon or an unusually low tide, you can play the recording again, like stepping into a memory. Rungholt, they say, was one of those places. And the bells? They're just the first note. You close the laptop. You need air. Outside, the sun is setting. A pale, bloodless orange that gives everything a sickly glow. You walk through the narrow streets, hands in pockets, half hoping you'll stumble onto another stone. But there's nothing, until the church. It's small, older than the others, with a roof that bows slightly in the middle and walls made of irregular stones. It looks like it's been holding itself together out of sheer habit. The doors open, no lights on inside. You step in. It's colder here, dusty. The pews are crooked, like they've been shuffled around by confused hands. The altar is plain, but behind it stands a small, unremarkable bell tower. There's a rope dangling. You should not pull that rope. You're not stupid. You know how stories like this go. But then again, it's just a bell, right? You take 1 step forward, then 2. You grip the rope. The fibers are rough, old, dry as bone. You give it a tiny tug. No sound. You pull harder. Nothing. Then suddenly a tone. But it's not coming from this church. It's coming from underneath. A low, long dong, like a cathedral bell hit underwater. It rumbles through the floorboards, through your shoes, into your legs. And that's when you realize something horrifying. The bell tower in this church has no bell. You run. back out into the street, back into the fading daylight, back to the car. You don't look back, but in the pit of your stomach, you know what that sound was. The second bell. You don't sleep that night. You try. You really do. The guest house mattress is lumpy but serviceable. The pillow smells vaguely like lavender and someone else's shampoo. You even leave a fan running for background noise, just like you always tell people to do in my videos. But it doesn't help, because every time you close your eyes, the same sound echoes in your head. Not music, not a voice, just that deep, impossible bell. Low, slow, and underwater. By 4 a.m., you give up. You sit at the edge of the bed, staring at your boots by the radiator like they're going to offer you answers. The mud's crusted now, gray and flaking. If you sniff closely, which you do not recommend, you can still smell the sea on them. That shouldn't be possible. You're 2 hours inland, and still the salt lingers. By 6 a.m., you're back on the road. Coffee in a paper cup. Radio off. Just you and the bell. You drive aimlessly at first, letting your instincts take the wheel. Something in you wants to go back toward the coast, to stand on the flats again and dare the third bell to ring. But something else, something deeper, older, smarter, wants answers first. So you make a detour to a library, specifically a cramped, neglected historical archive in the back of a Lutheran church. You found it online, tucked away on an old German tourism website. A treasure trove of regional documents, supposedly maintained by the same two elderly historians since the 1970s. You don't expect much. You get more than you bargained for. The building smells like old paper and boiled cabbage. A little bell jingles when you enter. Not a sinister one, thankfully, just a normal shop bell. A woman with horn-rimmed glasses looks up from behind a desk stacked with boxes labeled things like Flood 1362, uncatalogued, and bell rumors, local accounts. Promising. You explain what you're looking for. You expect her to scoff. Instead, she nods, disappears into the back, and returns with a bundle of handwritten folios tied together with a red ribbon. These are from Pastor Lenz's collection, she says. He cataloged local flood stories before the war. You raise an eyebrow. Which war? She doesn't answer, just hands you the bundle. You sit down, untie the ribbon, and start reading. Most of it is what you'd expect. Vague rumors, family tales passed down through generations, ghost stories told by children. But then, tucked between two brittle pages, you find a drawing. It's rough, clearly done by hand, but shockingly detailed. A church half submerged in water, with a single bell tower still visible. The bell is tilted, like it's halfway through falling. And beneath it, faces, dozens of them, some screaming, some singing, one looking directly at the viewer. It's not a beautiful drawing. It's not even a good one, but something about it feels accurate. You flip to the next page and freeze, because written there in cramped Latin is a short passage. Et campana sonuit tertio, et tunc non erant amplius superficium. And the bell rang a third time, and then there was no more surface. You stare at those lines for a long time. They don't feel like a metaphor. You leave the library before noon. The drawing still burned into your eyes. The old woman doesn't ask what you found. She doesn't need to. Outside, the air feels heavier, like the pressure dropped while you were inside, like something shifted. You don't check your phone. You don't call anyone. You just drive, back toward the flats, back toward where this started. But you don't go to Pellworm this time. You go to a place mentioned in the margins of the drawing, a place called Norderug. Tiny, barely inhabited, no roads, just a windswept speck of land, barely poking above the sea. Inaccessible during high tide. You time your arrival for the low. And when you get there, it's exactly what you feared. Flat, silent, deserted, except for the tower. It's not much of a tower anymore, just a stone stump, half swallowed by marsh grass. But someone built it long ago. The stones are too uniform to be natural, the shape too deliberate, and in the middle of it, barely visible under the moss, you see it. A hook, not a big one, rusted, iron, mounted into the stone. For a bell, of course. There's no bell here now, just the memory of one. You stand in the middle of that ruin for a long time, staring out across the flatlands. In the distance, you can see the sea returning, slowly, like a cat stalking its prey. The wind has picked up. The clouds are lowering. You have maybe 2 hours before the tide cuts you off. You should leave. You don't. Instead, you walk the edge of the ruin, letting your fingers trace the stones. They're smoother than you expected, worn down by centuries of wind and salt. You spot faint carvings, maybe letters, maybe runes. You can't read them. You're not sure you want to. And then you hear it, the third bell. But it doesn't come from below this time. It comes from inside your head. Or maybe not. It's hard to tell. The sound is deeper now, slower, less like a bell, more like the idea of a bell. A vibration in your bones, a throb in your teeth. You try to move, but your legs won't. You try to speak, but your mouth doesn't work right. The world seems to tilt slightly to the left. Just a little, just enough. And in that moment, you see them. Not clearly, not like ghosts, more like heat ripples across the flats. Shapes, figures, moving slowly, knee-deep in the tide, heads bowed. Procession. They're walking toward the sea, not away. One of them looks up, not at you, through you, and then the sound stops, just like that, gone. You stumble back, gasping, like someone pulled your head out of deep water. You look around. The tower is still there. The tide is rising, but the procession is gone. You run, not away, just enough, back to your car. Back across the now wet flats, slipping more than walking. Your chest aches, your ears ring, not from noise, from silence. The bell has stopped, for now, but it's been rung 3 times, and that changes everything. You wake up the next morning with salt in your mouth. Not metaphorical salt, not the residue of fear or nerves or nightmares. Actual physical salt. Your tongue tastes like the edge of a titapool. Your lips are chapped and your eyes sting, as if you'd spent the whole night swimming in seawater without ever opening them. You sit up fast. The room is strange. Too bright, too quiet, too unfamiliar. You're not in your guest house anymore. You're not even in a bed. You're in your car. Driver's seat reclined, jacket for a blanket, one boot off and resting on the dashboard like it wandered up there without your permission. There's mud on the windshield, seaweed stuck to the side mirror, and on the passenger seat, a tiny bell. No rope, no clapper, just a small brass shell, etched with faint symbols, worn smooth with age. You stare at it like it's a live animal, like it might twitch. It doesn't. You reach out. Don't. You pick it up anyway. It's heavier than it looks. Cold. The surface is tacky, like it's been soaking in brine for centuries and has only now begun to dry. The symbols aren't recognizable. Not Latin, not German, not even Norse. Just old and hungry. There's no logical explanation for how it got here. You locked the car. You remember locking it. And besides, who carries around just a bell shell? No string, no support, no purpose. Unless it was the purpose. You put it back down, carefully, like you're handling someone else's memory. You check your phone. It's dead. Not low battery, dead. Drained. The screen doesn't even flicker. You turn the key in the ignition. Nothing. A chill slides down your spine, not just cold but aware. You're stuck, and the tide's coming in. Again. You climb out of the car and do a quick 360. You're parked on a narrow, dirt track beside what looks like a sheep field. The sea is out of sight, but you can smell it. That sour, sharp stink of kelp and decay. You know it's not far. You start walking. You don't have a plan, but the bells do. About a kilometer in, you spot it, a stele. A rough stone pillar standing alone near a small ditch, clearly older than everything else around it. It's got a familiar word carved into its face. Rungholt. But this one's different. Beneath the name is a small relief carving. A man kneeling, beneath the sea, arms raised, palms out, not in surrender, in worship. You touch the carving, half expecting a jolt. Nothing. But when you pull your fingers away, your hand smells like metal. You start to remember the stories. Not the modern ones, the real ones. Whispers from monks and sailors and midwives. Stories about what was heard after the flood. Not just the bells, but voices. They weren't screams. They were songs. And that's the part everyone skips when they tell the tale of Rungholt. The part that doesn't fit into nice, clean historical boxes. Because when the flood came, the people didn't run. They didn't pray. They didn't even fight. They sang. According to a 15th century account found in Lubeck, there were fishermen who claimed to hear harmonies riding on the storm winds that night. Low chants, carried over the water like foghorns. And as the waves swept over the city, those voices didn't vanish. They grew louder. One monk, writing years later, claimed that God didn't punish Rungholt. He listened to it. He joined in. Of course, historians still argue about that. Some say it's metaphor, that the singing was just the wind in the spires. Others claim it was a form of collective hysteria, people trying to find peace in the face of death. A few fringe voices even suggest the people of Rungholt believed in something older than Christianity. Something deeper, something wet. You feel that chill again. The kind that doesn't come from the air. You know you're not alone. You turn around and there it is. Not a person, not a ghost, a building, half buried in the mud, maybe 100 meters away, right where the ditch bends. You shouldn't be there. It wasn't there a moment ago, but it's real. You can see the slanted roof, the sunken doorway, the crooked cross still clinging to the apex. A chapel. You walk toward it. The grass underfoot is slick. The ground sags with every step. A few more hours and this entire field will be underwater. But right now, it's yours. You reach the door. It's not locked. You push. It opens with a groan so long and low it sounds like a throat clearing after centuries of silence. Inside, the air is thick. Not dusty, wet. Everything is damp. The walls drip. The pews are soft with rot. The altar is covered in a thin layer of salt, crusted like snow. And on the far wall, a bell, full-sized, cracked down the middle, hanging by a rusted iron loop. It shouldn't be able to ring. It already has. 3 times. You approach slowly, each step making the wood floor creak and weep. The room smells like mildew and old coins. You half expect someone to be kneeling at the altar, whispering to something below the boards. But you're alone, except you're not, because now you hear it. Not the bell, the choir, soft, gentle, dissonant, not in Latin, not in German, just syllables, floating, repeating. They're not coming from inside the chapel. They're coming from underneath it. You drop to your knees, press your ear to the floor. There, just beneath the boards, you hear it. A melody, slow, circular, like a lullaby being hummed through layers of mud. You're not sure how long you lie there. Minutes, hours. It feels like a lifetime and an instant. But when you finally sit up again, something has changed. The bell? It's gone. Not hanging. Not cracked. Just not there. You look around the room. Nothing else has moved. Except the door. It's closed. You didn't close it. You stand. Step backward. Slowly. Your hand finds the handle. You pull. It opens. And outside, the sea. Not a field. Not a road. You are now standing at the edge of the flats. And the tide is rising. Fast. Too fast. You run. Boots splashing through ankle-deep water. Salt spray in your eyes. Breath sharp in your chest. The land seems to recede ahead of you like it doesn't want you to leave. And just as the water hits your knees, you stumble onto a gravel path. Cars. A fence. A sign pointing to a tourist kiosk. You made it. You turn around. The chapel is gone. Of course it is. But in your pocket, the small bell, still there, still cold, still silent, for now. You don't tell anyone. How could you? Hey, I woke up with a cursed bell in my car, followed a hallucination across rising seawater, found a chapel that doesn't exist, and heard ghost hymns under the floorboards. Yeah, that'll go over well. So instead you drive, slowly, aimlessly, half hoping your tires will carry you to sanity by sheer inertia. The bell stays in your pocket. You haven't touched it since you escaped the chapel, but you feel it constantly. Its weight, its chill, its absolute refusal to be forgotten, like a tooth in your mouth that doesn't hurt yet, but knows it will. You stop for gas in a nameless village, buy a lukewarm meat pie and a bottle of sparkling water. The attendant, a man with a face like burnt toast, gives you a look that suggests he's seen people like you before. People with eyes too wide, too quiet. You thank him and leave. The pie goes untouched. Instead, you check your messages. Your phone works again. No missed calls. No alerts. Just a string of unread notifications from history forums you follow. One catches your eye. Unusual artifact found near Tettenbull. You click. The photo shows exactly what you expect. A bell fragment. Not brass. Not bronze. Something darker. Iron or lead. Covered in crusted salt and faint inscriptions. Discovered by an amateur detectorist in a cow pasture that shouldn't have held anything older than fertilizer. The fragment is shaped like a tongue. No one seems to know how old it is, but the poster says something that freezes your blood. It rang when I picked it up, just once. No explanation. You know what that means. That was someone's first bell. So now you're not alone. The thought is both comforting and deeply, deeply wrong. You keep scrolling. More stories surface. Fishermen finding bits of carved stone in their nets. Tourists hearing strange vibrations while walking across the tidal flats. A pair of hikers who swear they saw church spires just beneath the surface during low tide. But only for a second, and then they were gone. The world is catching on. Or maybe the bells are waking up. You need to think. So you do something impulsive. You drive to Husum. It's a larger town on the coast, modern, busy, unbothered by ancient flood legends. But Husum has something you need, a museum. Specifically, the Nordsee Museum Husum, a place with a dusty, overlooked room labeled Rungholt and the Lost Settlements of the North Sea. You've been there before, years ago, back when the legend was just that, a legend. Now it's something else. You walk through the museum quickly, past the taxidermied seals, past the cheerful interactive exhibit on dikes and climate resilience. And then you reach the Rungholt room. It's quiet. No one else here. The lights buzz faintly overhead. Inside, it's a small space, maybe 4 meters across, dominated by a single glass case. Inside the case, a bell, a full-sized, corroded medieval church bell, recovered in fragments from a dig near Pellworm in the 1920s. The plaque says it took 10 years to reassemble, that it's a miracle so much of it survived, that no one has ever been able to explain how it remained so intact after centuries underwater. You don't need to read the plaque. You already know. This is one of them, one of the original bells of Rungholt. Not a replica, the real thing. It's mounted on a wooden stand, tilted slightly, as if it remembers what it's like to fall. There's a crack down one side, just like the one in the chapel. But there's something else, something the plaque doesn't mention. Inside the bell, barely visible through the opening, you spot a rope. Frayed, modern, leading under the pedestal. You crouch, look closer. The rope connects to a small mechanism. A button, an audio feature probably. Museums do this sometimes. Press a button, hear the sound. You hesitate. Then, against every instinct, you press it. First, nothing. Then, dong. Not a recording. Not a speaker. The actual bell just rang. The room shakes. The lights flicker. A museum guard pokes his head in and looks at you suspiciously. "Did you press something?" he asks in German. You lie. Shake your head. Shrug like you're just a confused tourist. He grunts and leaves. But your ears are still ringing. Because that bell? That was number 4. But it's not supposed to go past 3. You're the only one who hears the others now. You leave the museum in a daze. Outside, the sky is clouding again. Not stormy, just heavy, pregnant with pressure. You sit on a bench near the harbor. Watch the gulls circle like they know something's coming. The sea is calm but wrong. Too still, too flat, like a mirror waiting to break. You take out the small bell from your pocket. You hold it gently in your palm. You lift it to your ear. And for the first time, you hear it whisper. Not a ring, not a toll, a whisper, a word you can't translate. Wet, ancient syllables brushing past your skin like cold fingers. You drop it. It doesn't hit the ground. It's just gone. You stare at your hand. Still cold. Still tingling. Still marked. Because once the bells begin to count you, they don't stop. You try to leave. You do everything right. Book a train ticket inland. Check out of your guest house politely. Pack your things like a rational adult who isn't haunted by subaquatic liturgy and vanishing bells. You even stop at a bakery on the way to the station and buy a perfectly normal sandwich, the kind wrapped in thin wax paper and smelling faintly of mustard and resignation. Feels like progress. Until the train doesn't come. You check the time. Check again. The board says Verspätung delayed. No reason. No explanation. Just an empty platform and the soft wheeze of distant gulls, mocking you from somewhere above the gray tile roof of the station. You wait. 15 minutes. 20. Still nothing. You look around. No one else seems concerned. In fact, no one else is there. That's when the whisper returns. Not out loud. Inside. The same syllables you heard in the museum. Only now they're clearer. A little louder. Still unintelligible but rhythmic. Pulsing. Like someone's knocking gently on the door between your thoughts. You leave the station. You don't remember choosing to. Your legs just take over. You walk through town without really seeing it. Streets blur. Shop windows glint like water. The ground seems softer under your shoes. The air thicker. By the time you realize where you're heading, it's too late. You're back at the harbor. The sea has returned. High tide now. And waiting at the edge, tied to a post with a fraying rope, is a small wooden boat. Old. No engine. Just oars. Your name is carved into the hull. No, not your real name. The one you dreamed last night. You shouldn't get in. You know this. You're not a character in a fairy tale. Boats with names that whisper themselves into your dreams don't end well. But the rope is already untying itself. The oars are moving. You step in. The boat doesn't rock, doesn't creak. It just accepts you. And then it begins to move. Not fast, just steadily, like it knows the way. The water is calm. Too calm. You try to look back. See if the harbor is still there. It's not. Behind you, the fog has risen. Thick, wet, gray as regret. You're alone. You try to check your phone. It's gone. You try to speak. You can't. Instead, you listen. Because now, from across the water, comes a sound. Not the bell. Not yet. Voices. Low and layered. A language with no dictionary. Male, female, old, young. Melting into one continuous chorus. They're not singing to you. They're singing to each other. And whatever's beneath them. The boat drifts toward a shape on the waterline. Flat. Angular. Slowly becoming recognizable. It's a roof. And then a spire. And then a whole row of buildings just below the surface. You're gliding over the edge of Rungholt. It's there. Not gone. Not buried. Just waiting. The water above it is perfectly clear, perfectly still. You can see cobbled streets, long collapsed walls, tangled seaweed rising from what used to be doorways. And in the center, a tower. Not tall, not proud, just present. Half standing, half fallen. There's no boat dock, no pier, no place to land. But the boat stops anyway. You know what to do. You step out. You don't sink. The water holds you. You walk forward, feet skimming the submerged city like it's only pretending to be gone. Beneath you, something moves. Shadows between the shadows. They don't rush. They drift. And then you hear it. Bell number 5. It shouldn't be possible. But there it is. Not from above. Not from below. From within you. It rings in your bones. In your skull. In your teeth. And this time, it's not just one tone. It's a chord. 3 notes. All out of tune. All horribly perfect together. Your knees buckle. You fall forward, but the water catches you. Supports you. And now, for the first time, you understand the words. They're not words. They're names. Not yours. But you know them. They rise in you like air bubbles. Adelbrecht. Gesieck. Milo. Thietmar. People you've never met. People you've never studied. But now they're part of you. Rungholt isn't a city anymore. It's a choir. And you've just been handed the sheet music. You don't remember getting back to land. One moment you're floating above drowned rooftops. The next, you're lying on wet grass, shivering, a sheep looking at you like you just fell from space. You're inland again. No boat, no fog, no bell, just a sore chest and a buzzing in your ears. You sit up. You look at your hand. Something's burned into the skin. Not letters, not numbers. A symbol, one you saw inside the chapel, carved into the wall behind the altar. You're marked now, not cursed, not blessed, called Rungholt remembers you, and it's not done singing. The mark on your hand won't wash off. You try everything: soap, hot water, hand sanitizer that smells like artificial citrus, and poor life choices. You even go so far as to scrub it with the edge of a credit card in a moment of mild hysteria. Nothing works. The symbol stays. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't itch. But it pulses. Not constantly, just when you're not paying attention. Like it knows how to hide behind distraction. Like it knows you. You wrap a bandage over it and leave town without saying goodbye. Not that there's anyone left to say it to. You haven't seen a single familiar face in days. Not the guest house owner. Not the historian with the ribbon-bound notes. Not even the guy at the gas station with the 1,000-yard stare and the sandwich made of sadness. It's like you've slipped into a version of the world slightly adjacent to the one you started in. And Rungholt lives in the in-between. You drive without GPS now. It won't load. Your phone still turns on, but only shows a static map with a blinking dot in the middle of the Wadden Sea. The battery holds at 100% without charging. It's not a phone anymore, it's a beacon. You follow the blinking dot. The roads get narrower, the villages more silent. You pass fields of tall grass that sway against the wind's direction, as though leaning toward the shore, bowing. By the time you reach the edge of Beltringharder, the tide is low again, and something has changed. It isn't just the landscape that looks different. It's the sky. The color's wrong, too pale, too green, like the moment before a thunderstorm in a world that forgot how to make thunder. The clouds move slowly, but not in the right direction. You don't like how they watch you. Yes, you're sure now. The clouds are watching. You park the car next to a flock of stone sheep. At least you think they're statues. You don't check too closely. One of them is blinking. You step out and follow the dike path westward. It's all familiar now. The scent of salt, the chill in the air, the way your boots leave no footprints even in the damp mud. The sea doesn't resist you anymore. It welcomes you. And then there it is. Not Rungholt. Not yet. But its voice. The sixth bell. It doesn't ring this time. It sings. A single, sustained note that seems to come from every direction at once. Low and warm and utterly alien. It doesn't hurt your ears, it asks. It's waiting for something, and you know what it wants. You reach into your coat pocket. There, where the small bell used to be, is now something else. A key, old iron, ornate, covered in corrosion that flakes away as you hold it. You don't remember finding it, but it's yours. It fits the mark on your hand exactly. You press it against your palm and feel it click, as if your body is now part of some greater mechanism. You follow the sound, out past the reeds, into the flats. The tide is due in 2 hours. You'll be underwater long before that. But somehow you're not worried. Your breath is steady, your legs strong. You walk until the land forgets itself. And then, there, the ground dips, just slightly, and you see it. A hatch, set into the mud, made of stone, rimmed with iron. Not a modern manhole, not a floodgate. Older, hand-carved, marked with the same symbol as your palm. You brush away the sludge and insert the key. It doesn't resist. The hatch opens inward, like the mouth of a creature that's been waiting to inhale. You descend. One step, then another. The stairs spiral. The air grows warmer, not stale, humid, heavy with breath. You reach the bottom and find a hallway, carved from stone, but polished smooth by time and water. It stretches forward into blackness. The only light comes from above, where the hatch shrinks into a coin of gray sky. You walk. The walls are lined with bells, tiny, silent, hung by threads that never sway. Some are cracked, some are whole. All are listening. You try not to look at them, but they look at you, and the song returns. Fainter now, more personal. Says your name, not the one on your ID, the one from the dream. You reach the end of the tunnel. A chamber opens, circular, high-ceilinged. At the center, a pool, still, black, rimmed with salt and carved figures. You recognize some, the same faces from the drawing in the friar's notes. The ones singing beneath the tower. The choir. They're waiting. You kneel. Not because you want to, because you have to. It's the only way to hear the seventh bell. It's not a sound. It's a memory. Your memory. Except it doesn't belong to you. You see it clearly. You're standing in a bell tower in 1362. The storm is coming. The sea is rising. But no one runs. They sing. You lift the hammer. You strike the bell. Not in warning. In praise. You welcome the flood. You call it home. And now, back in your body, knees in the mud, breath ragged, you know the truth. You weren't called here by the bells. You've always belonged to them, and they're almost ready. One more bell remains. Just one. And it's not waiting under the sea. It's waiting inside you. You surface just as the tide begins to rise. Not metaphorically, literally. You claw your way out of the hatch, mud-slicked, shivering, half expecting the sky to tear open above you. But it's quiet, almost disappointingly so. No lightning, no thunder, just the sound of the sea returning to claim what it always does. You turn, expecting the hatch to vanish like everything else in this cursed story. It doesn't. It remains open, gaping, as if daring you to jump back in. But you don't. You can't. You've brought something back with you, something that doesn't like to be underground anymore. It writhes just beneath your skin, like a bell string pulled too tight. Your ears pop, your chest flutters, and somewhere in the distance, a place no map will ever show again, the 8th bell rings. But this one's different. It's yours. You don't hear it the way you did the others. You feel it, in your ribs, in your teeth, in your eyes. And for the first time, you understand what the bells have been trying to do. They aren't warnings. They're gatherings. Each one calls a name. Each name answers. Each answer binds. You are the 8th. There are more coming. You stagger toward your car, still parked beside the field of not statue sheep. They've turned to face the sea now. All of them, as if waiting for an arrival. You don't make eye contact. The drive back is a blur. Not in a poetic way, in a neurological way. You don't remember turning the key. Don't remember roads or signs or the low, dreadful beat of the GPS that now pulses like a metronome set to your heartbeat. When you blink, you're home. Wherever home is. It looks like your apartment. Smells like your shampoo. Your coffee machine still has grounds from 3 days ago. There's a package on the floor you don't remember ordering. You tear it open. Inside is a bell clapper. Just the clapper. Wrapped in seaweed. You run to the sink, toss it in, scrub your hands with soap that smells like aloe and denial. The mark on your palm glows faintly, not visibly, but you know it's there. You stare at your reflection in the bathroom mirror. The face looks like yours, but the eyes are deeper. You don't sleep that night. You try. God, you try. You drink tea. You light a candle. You curl under a weighted blanket and hum songs from before you knew what was hidden beneath the tide. But every time you close your eyes, the choir sings, and you're back beneath the water, the submerged chapel, the endless hallway, the reflection of yourself walking beside you but 3 seconds behind. In one dream, the bells ring in perfect unison. In another, you are the bell, the clapper swinging from your throat, the song growing louder. By morning, you've made a decision. You can't run anymore, because the bells aren't chasing you. They're guiding you, so you do something you haven't done in weeks. You go back online. You make a post. Nothing fancy. No hashtags. No explanations. Just one sentence. Has anyone else heard the bells? You close the laptop. You wait. The replies come faster than you expect. Yes, 3 times. Then nothing. Twice. And my dog won't go near me now. Heard 5. Something's changed. I dreamed of a city under the sea. Is this related? I live in Kansas. Why do I know the name Rungholt? They come from everywhere. Iceland,
Chile,
Ethiopia, South Korea, a schoolteacher in Finland, a retired dentist in Morocco, a teenager in Oregon who says the 8th bell rang the moment her nose started bleeding. This isn't folklore anymore. It's happening. You make a map. Red pins for those who've heard 1 bell, orange for 2, yellow for 3. By the time you place the 8th red pin, the map is bleeding. The bells are no longer secrets. They are signals. And the 9th bell? That one's going to be different. You don't know why, only that you're the one who has to ring it. It won't be in a church, or a ruin, or a ghost chapel beneath the flats. It'll be in you, somewhere between your lungs and your spine, a bell tower of bone. You try not to panic. You fail, but only a little, because part of you, the part that woke up on a boat with sea salt dreams and a name that hums underwater, has already accepted this. You're not running from the bells anymore. You're walking toward them, and with each step, the world forgets what silence is. The bell doesn't need a tower anymore. It has you, and it knows exactly how to use you. You feel it in the back of your throat now, an itch that won't go away, like the start of a scream that never finishes. Every breath you take feels slightly too loud. Every word you try to say vibrates at a pitch just a little off, as if the air around you is tuning itself to something older, deeper. You stop talking to people, not for fear of what you might say, for fear of what might come through. It's not possession. It's not madness. It's resonance. You're being tuned, and the closer you get to the ninth bell, the more the world seems to echo that process. The lights in your building flicker in time with your pulse. Water spirals the wrong direction in the sink. Shadows arrive before the things that cast them. And sometimes, when the wind hits just right, you hear your own voice calling back to you, but not from your body, from somewhere else. You start keeping a notebook. Not to explain anything, you gave up on explanations around bell number 5, but to document patterns. Here's what you notice. The eighth bell marked a shift. People are reporting shared dreams now. In the dreams, the city under the sea is rising. Slowly, as if testing gravity. No one dreams of drowning. Everyone dreams of singing. And then there's the humming. It starts on a Tuesday. At first, you think it's tinnitus, stress, lack of sleep, bad posture. But it doesn't behave like a medical symptom. It doesn't fade. It grows. By Wednesday, it's loud enough to drown out the fridge. By Friday, it hums in harmony with your thoughts. You try noise-canceling headphones. The hum eats them. You try sleeping with white noise. The hum joins in. You begin to understand why monasteries used bells. Not just to mark time, but to hold it in place. You're running out of time. On Saturday, you take the train back to the coast. You don't tell anyone. No goodbye notes. No cryptic messages. Just a coat, a bag, and a notebook filled with songs you've never written but somehow remember. The train is nearly empty. One woman in the seat behind you hums quietly to herself. You recognize the melody instantly. It's the same one the underwater choir sang in the chapel beneath Norderug. She meets your eyes in the reflection of the window and smiles. You don't speak to each other. You're not supposed to. When you arrive, the sea is already out. Perfect timing, as if it's been waiting. You walk alone. The wind tugs at your coat like a child needing attention. The air smells like brine and forgotten things. You follow the flats until your boots sink slightly with every step. The ground is saturated but not submerged. The sea is low, but the tide watches you from the horizon. It knows. This is the place. The spot where the ninth bell is supposed to ring. There's no hatch, no chapel, just you. You kneel, not out of reverence, out of necessity. Your legs stop working properly. You close your eyes. You breathe in, and it begins. Not a sound. Pressure. Building inside your ribs like something is inflating beneath your lungs. You gasp and the note slips out. You don't speak it. You don't even mean to make it. It uses you. Your mouth opens and the sound flows out. Rich, deep, layered with harmonics that shouldn't be possible from a single human voice. Your breath becomes a vibration. Your spine a tuning fork. The air around you shivers. Mud cracks in thin lines beneath your knees. And then, The ninth bell. It rings from your chest. Not metaphorically, physically. You feel your sternum shift. You feel your jaw lock. Your teeth rattle like glass in a suitcase. But the sound that emerges isn't pain. It's beautiful. Terrible, yes, but beautiful. The kind of sound that doesn't end when it ends. It just waits inside everything it touches. When it fades, the silence is alive. And the sea answers. It rushes forward, not a wave, but a rise. A steady, gentle swelling like the earth just sighed. You stagger to your feet. All around you, the world is listening. The wind stops. The gulls freeze midair. Even the clouds halt their slow, circular churn. Time has been hollowed out. You are standing in the moment between things. Between high and low tide. Between flood and ebb. Between memory and myth. And something is walking toward you. Not from the horizon. From beneath. A figure rising slowly from the mud. Draped in salt-crusted robes. Eyes closed. Hands raised. You don't move. You can't. Not from fear. From recognition. You know this figure, not as a person, as a part of yourself. The part that remembered the names, that dreamed the hymns, that knelt before the first bell was ever cast. The figure opens its eyes and speaks. The voice is your voice, but older, sadder, more certain. One bell remains, and then it dissolves. Not vanishes, dissolves. Into mist, into sea foam, into memory, leaving behind only a single perfect silence. Your heart starts again. You blink, and the tide is at your feet. It's time to go, but you're not done. Not yet. You don't remember walking back. You remember arriving. One moment you're ankle deep in water, breath shaking in your lungs, and the next, you're in a cafe, warm, crowded, loud. The hum of espresso machines, clatter of porcelain cups, and the low murmur of people living their lives as if the sea hasn't been whispering names into their bloodstreams. No one looks at you, even though you're dripping seawater onto the tile, even though there's still salt crust on your sleeves, even though your eyes are black around the edges with something that isn't mascara or exhaustion. You walk to the counter. You don't order. The barista hands you a cup without speaking. No name, no logo, just a plain white ceramic mug, filled with something hot and dark and bitter. You sip. Tastes like home, if home were a place you couldn't return to. You sit at the only empty table. The seat across from you is taken, not by a person, by a bell. It's the size of a grapefruit, brass, perfect, no cracks, no inscriptions, just polished metal and stillness. It doesn't ring, it doesn't move, it just waits, like everything else. You take another sip. Time behaves strangely now. The cafe doesn't age. The coffee doesn't cool. The people never leave. It's like you're inside a pocket of the world where things stop. Not freeze. Hold. And the bell? It listens. You think you've felt the whole of this mystery. You haven't. Because this is the first moment since it began where you aren't being watched. Not by the bells. Not by the sea. Not even by yourself. You're alone with it. And you realize the final bell isn't a threat. It's an invitation. You reach forward, slowly, expecting the usual. Cold metal, a pulse of ancient memory, a flare of uncanny dread. But when your fingers touch it, nothing. No hum, no burn, just warmth. Familiar warmth, like skin or breath. You lift it. It's weightless. It belongs in your hand like it always did. And then softly, not aloud, inside, question. Are you ready to remember? You want to lie. You want to say no. But your hand rings. Just once. The bell hasn't moved. But your bones have. Something inside you shudders like an echo through a canyon of years. And then, you're not in the cafe anymore. You're standing at the edge of the North Sea. But it's not the present. It's January 16th, 1362, the night of the second Groot Mandrank, the great drowning of men. Rungholt isn't legend here. It's alive. The wind howls with urgency, not violence, just warning. The sky is blackened, but not with clouds, with smoke. You smell burning peat, soaked thatch, the acrid stench of livestock panic. You see the people, running, no, arranging, lining the church steps with lanterns, carrying bells to the shore, lighting candles on the water. They know, they've always known. This wasn't a sudden storm. It was a summoning, a reunion. You look down. You're wearing robes. You're holding a book with blank pages. But you know every word inside it. Songs, verses, names. You walk through the city. You hear the other yous, calling, singing, ringing. Each bell is a vow. Each voice a remembering. The sea crashes closer. But no one screams. They bow. They raise their hands. And together, they ring the final bell. It isn't heard with ears. It's heard in everything else. Rock, water, memory, flesh. The bell unmakes the city not with force, but with permission. Rungholt doesn't drown. It returns to where it was born, to the place before time. And now you know the truth. You weren't chosen. You were remembered. And the bell in your hand? It was always waiting to come home. You come back gasping, not from water, from memory. The cafe is gone. The bell too. You're lying in bed, soaked in sweat, hands gripping the sheets like they might slip away. It's dark, real suburban dark. Not the kind that hides monsters. The kind that forgets you're even there. Your phone buzzes on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. 9 have rung. 1 remains. You don't reply. What would you say? That you remember the flood? That you watched a city walk willingly into the sea? That you weren't just dreaming. You were participating? You rise. You make coffee with hands that still tremble. Every object in your kitchen feels different now. Your mug feels older. Your fridge hums in a minor key. Your walls breathe just slightly. You stare out the window. The sunrise feels artificial, like stage lighting. You check your computer. You check your notebook. They're the same, but you aren't. Your body feels like a bell tower now. Every step, a vibration. Every blink, a chime. You sit. You write. You don't know what you're writing, but the words fall out of you like they've been waiting centuries to be remembered. They come fast, too fast. You fill page after page with names you've never heard but suddenly mourn, coordinates that don't appear on any modern map, fragments of song written in a musical scale that doesn't exist. Somewhere between the 7th page and the 8th, your hand stops, not because it's tired, because it knows the shape of what's coming next. The 10th bell. It's different. It isn't a tone. It isn't a call. It's an answer. You feel it before you hear it. A subtle shift in pressure behind your ears, like the moment before your plane lands. Then a pop. Then silence. And in the silence, a single phrase repeated in your mind. One who rings must return. You know what that means. The bells weren't just songs. They were keys, unlocking parts of the world that forgot themselves, unlocking you, and now you're the door. You grab your coat. You're not afraid anymore. There's no room for that now. Only return. Your boots hit the pavement like footsteps in a long corridor. You walk to the train station just like before, except now, the air seems to part around you. People turn their heads as you pass, not in curiosity, but in recognition, as if their eyes can see some trace of sea salt fire glowing beneath your skin. You board a train that doesn't have a schedule. It simply arrives. The doors hiss open like a sigh. You sit by the window. The world outside moves wrong, not forward or backward, but inward. You see buildings collapse and rebuild in the same breath. You see clouds reverse. You see bells hanging in the sky like stars. The train doesn't stop at a station. It stops at a shore, the sea again. But this time there's no land left in front of it. Only a flat plain of water stretching into a gray that has no top or bottom. There is a platform, old wood, salt warped, and on it stands a choir. You know every face, not because you've met them, because you've been them. They raise their hands, and in perfect silence, they show you the shape of the final bell. It isn't an object, it's a gesture. You kneel, not out of humility, out of memory. You lift your voice, and instead of sound, you speak Rungholt. Not the city, the feeling of it, the warmth before the flood, the hush before the hymn, the peace of being known by something older than death. The platform beneath you begins to dissolve. The sea lifts you without drowning. You float upward, past every bell that's ever rung, past every name you've ever carried. And at the height of it all, suspended in the breath before sound, you hear the 10th bell. It is your own voice, not singing, not ringing, but calling the others home. And they answer, together, one final note, no echo, because nothing follows it. You're weightless now, not in the joyful child on a swing kind of way, not in the floating through dreams kind of way. You're weightless like a name removed from a gravestone. You drift in a space that isn't quite sea, isn't quite sky. It's not blue, it's not black. It's the color of forgetting, of parchment turned to ash, of the silence between the last note of a hymn and the first breath of someone about to cry. And floating beside you in a perfect ring are the others. 9 figures, all luminous, all incomplete. You don't recognize their faces, but you recognize their frequencies, the way each of them pulses in a slightly different rhythm, like bells still cooling after centuries of echoing. And then, a 10th shape begins to form. It starts small, a thread of sound wrapping itself into a spiral, a note that never quite resolves, curls inward again and again until it touches you. And in that moment, you remember why the bells called you. Not because you're special, because you're missing. The world has been turning with a hole in its song, and you've been the silence that needed to be sung back into place. The final bell isn't for you to ring. It's for you to become. You don't fight it. Not now. You breathe in the sound, and it breathes back. The void around you begins to fold. Not like paper, like memory. You see flashes. The salt chapel beneath Norderug. The drowned tower's bell with no clapper. The carved key that fit your hand like it had been waiting through time. The baritone hum that slid into your bones and made your dreams feel tidal. And beyond all that, Rungholt. But this time you see it before the storm. Children laughing along the docks. Fishermen mending nets and arguing about sea spirits. A priest polishing a bell with hands already trembling from the weight of prophecy. You were there. Of course you were. You weren't just a pilgrim in this story. You were a witness. You were one of the ones who refused to leave. When the storm warnings came, when the animals fled, when the wind began to speak in verses, you stayed. You rang the 7th bell, and you sang. The bell wasn't meant to save the city. It was meant to anchor it, so it wouldn't drift completely from time, so it could call back those who were once part of it. Like you feel the thread of sound finish its loop, ties you in. You are the 10th, the final resonance, not louder, just complete. The others begin to shift now. You see their outlines unravel, shimmering into streams of light that spiral downward, returning to wherever they were borrowed from. One returns to a monastery in Iceland, one to a desert cave in Tunisia, one to a garden in Kyoto, where no bell has ever been rung but the cicadas know the rhythm anyway. They don't disappear, they re-enter, like instruments being retuned. You're the last. The space around you tilts. The ocean begins to appear beneath your feet again. But now it's not just water. It's Rungholt's reflection. The city has risen halfway. Its towers shimmer like mirages. Its streets are paved in moving light. And above it all, floating in the same impossible stillness as you, the great bell, the original, the one that never fell, the one that was never cast in metal, the one that exists only in echo. It opens, like a flower made of sound, and it welcomes you. You step inside it. It isn't a space, it's a chord. Every breath you take becomes a note in a language older than storms. Every heartbeat is a verse. You understand now. You were never meant to find the city. You were meant to remember it, so that when the last silence came, there'd be someone left to sing it whole again. You begin to descend, slowly, not falling, returning, back into the tide, back into your body, back into a world where time resumes and salt still stings the air. But something is different now. The bells don't echo anymore. They reside inside you, soft and still, like breath, like memory, like home. When you open your eyes, the tide has rolled in. It laps quietly at your feet, not crashing or raging, just present, like a loyal dog, or a memory you'd forgotten you loved. You're back on the flats, but now they feel smaller, like a stage after the curtains dropped. The show is over, but something remains. The sky above you is ordinary again, pale blue, laced with tired clouds. The wind smells like fish and salt and rusted chains. Mundane, maybe even disappointing, after what you just came from. But it's real, and that's harder to deal with than you thought. Your body aches, not from injury, from returning. Like every cell had to squeeze back into place after remembering it was mortal. Your fingertips tingle. Your teeth feel loose. You half expect your shadow to start ringing every time you move. But it doesn't, because the bells aren't calling anymore. They're watching. You walk inland, slowly. Your boots leave clear prints this time. No ghosts following. No whispering reeds. Just the steady squish of mud and the soft sigh of a sea that's finally full. The landscape looks the same, but the people don't. Every person you pass, and there aren't many, feels like they're standing half a second out of sync with time. A fisherman stares too long. A cyclist blinks too slowly. The woman at the bakery counter gives you exact change for something you didn't say out loud. You ask for coffee. She hands it to you before you finish the sentence. You nod. She nods back. You don't speak, because you both know they've heard the 10th bell too. Maybe not all of them, but enough. Enough for the world to shift slightly. Enough for reality to develop seams. You sit outside on a damp bench, sipping hot bitter comfort. The cup is warm, but your fingers still feel like they belong to someone older. You watch the sea. You think about Rungholt. It's there now. Not metaphorically, not mythically. Actually, you can see the outline at low tide, just beneath the shimmer. Stone blocks too regular to be random. Angles too old to be modern. Like someone traced the memory of a city onto the ocean floor. And the bells? They aren't buried anymore. They're part of the tide. Sometimes the waves hum. Sometimes they pulse. Sometimes you swear they speak. Not words. Names. Milo. Thiatmar. Gasik. You're not special. You were just ready. And now you're a keeper. Not a prophet. Not a priest. Just someone who remembers when the world tried to forget itself. You finish the coffee, toss the cup, and then you hear it. Not a bell, a breath, drawn by the sea, exhaled by the sky. And in that breath, there is one more. You turn, but no one's behind you, just footprints in the mud, leading not toward town, but back out to sea. They aren't yours. They're fresh. Someone else heard it. Someone else is walking. You stand, because you're no longer the only one. The bells have finished their calling, but the echoes are recruiting. You walk back to the shore, slowly, like you're retracing steps that haven't been taken yet. The tide is still low. The air is still heavy. The world is still pretending to be normal. But the song has already begun again. You just can't hear it yet. You follow the footprints without question. They're deep, deliberate, pressed into the silt like someone was walking with purpose, but not in a hurry. You count each one, like notes in a song, and without meaning to, you begin to hum. The melody isn't familiar, but your body knows it. Your feet match its rhythm. Left, right, rest, repeat. The tide has begun to retreat again. Not fast, just enough to peel back the shore like a page you weren't supposed to dog-ear. The flats stretch before you like the skin of a sleeping animal. And at the edge of it all, there, a figure, far ahead, too distant to see clearly, but too still to be anything other than waiting. You move toward them, not with urgency, with understanding, because now, for the first time, you're not the one being called. You're the one arriving. The footprints continue, leading you through familiar terrain. There's the warped plank someone once called a footbridge, the rusted buoy full of birdsong, the stretch of mud that never quite dries. And then you see it, just beneath the surface. The stone, more of it now, bolder, unafraid. A line of cobbled street slicing through the flats like a spine, moss-covered, cracked, but undeniably real. The road to Rungholt no longer needs to hide. It's reasserting itself. You step onto it. The stone hums beneath your feet. You pause. Look up. The figure is closer now. Not walking, just standing, watching. No threat, no fear, only recognition. You take another step. The hum deepens, not louder, lower, like something buried remembering it used to breathe. With every footfall, you feel the world adjust around you. Time tries to behave. Physics pretends nothing's wrong. But you can sense the edges starting to peel. The sun flickers between two positions. Your shadow points in two directions. The air smells like brine and lavender and rain on ancient stone. The figure turns, begins walking, not away from you, beside you. They never look directly at you. They don't speak, but the message is clear. You're not here to end anything. You're here to make sure it continues. And so you do. You walk the drowned road together, not toward the city, but into it. Because Rungholt is no longer submerged. Not completely. The towers rise around you like silhouettes remembering how to be solid. The chapel roof curves above, reshaping itself from light and memory. The bells, God, the bells, float in the air like lanterns that forgot how to fall. The figure beside you lifts their hand. You stop. They point to a wall. Old stone, scraped and worn and barnacle-bitten, but beneath it carving. Your name, not the one you use on forms, the one you whispered in dreams, the one the sea answered. You touch it. The wall responds. It opens, not with creaking or crumbling, but with invitation. And behind it, another space, a chamber, circular, lit by the faintest blue shimmer that seems to come from inside the stone itself. And in the center, another bell, but this one is different. It isn't brass or bronze. It's glass, clear, perfect, fragile in the way old things are, like bone or silence. You reach toward it, and suddenly, this bell isn't meant to be rung. It's meant to hold the silence that follows all the others. The silence after the final hymn. The breath after the story ends. The hush before something begins again. You don't touch it. You just stand in front of it and listen to nothing, to everything, because in that silence you hear them, the monks who sang through the storm, the villagers who stood instead of ran, the bells that fell and were forgotten, the sea itself, all held here, not trapped, protected, like a book that only opens when the world is ready to read again. The figure beside you nods, steps back, fades, and you are alone, but only in the way a candle is alone in a room full of matches. You're not the keeper of the 10th bell. You're the one who guards the space after, the echo that waits. Time here doesn't tick. It pulses, like breath held between thoughts, like the moment after lightning but before the thunder. There's no clock in the chamber, no sunbeam crawling across stone, only the soft hum of a world that knows it's still turning, even if just barely. The silence here is different, not the silence of absence, the silence of completion, like the whole world just exhaled and now, finally, isn't in a hurry to inhale again. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to be still. And when you open them again, you are somewhere else, still underground, still surrounded by stone. But this isn't the chamber of the bell. This is older, rough-hewn walls, wet air, the smell of peat smoke and old wool. And lying in the center of the space, on a crude bed of straw and weathered cloth, is you, or a version of you, dressed in monk's robes, eyes closed, face calm, mouth slightly open, as if caught mid-prayer or mid-song. You take a step closer. The candlelight in the room flickers, casting double shadows. One for the monk on the ground, one for you standing above, and a third, smaller one behind you that doesn't seem to belong to anyone at all. You kneel. You look at the monk's face, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, you remember everything. Not just Rungholt, not just the bells, all of it. You remember sitting in this room as the storm began to rise. You remember debating whether to run. You remember choosing not to. And more than that, you remember why. Because your voice was one of the 10. Because someone had to stay behind and hold the song steady. Because the flood wasn't punishment. It was preservation. The sea didn't take Rungholt in anger. It hid it, to keep it safe until the bells could find their echoes again. You look down at your past self. You touch your own hand. And just before you vanish, you whisper something only a dying monk could ever understand. You weren't lost. You were saved. And then the room fades. No collapse. No transition. Just a blink. And you're back in the chamber, beside the glass bell. But you're not alone anymore. All around you, figures are forming. Not solid. Not entirely real. But there. Not ghosts. Not memories. Continuations. People who answered the bells in other times, other places. The woman who hummed on the train. The man who traced ancient maps in his sleep. The child in Kansas who dreamed of salt cathedrals. They gather around the bell without speaking. They already know. The silence has told them. One by one they sit. And you realize this is the new Rungholt. Not a place. A choir. Waiting. Preparing. Not to sing. But to be ready when the world forgets again. Because it will. History always does. But the bells will remember, and so will you. And when the next city needs saving, not from war, not from flood, but from amnesia, this bell will ring again. Not in churches, not in cathedrals, but in hearts like yours. Quiet, steady, true. The figures begin to fade. The chamber dims. The bell remains. And you, now and forever, are its keeper. The bell fades behind you, but its silence follows. Not as weight, as shape. The kind of shape that sound carves into a space long after the music ends. Like a cathedral echoing with a hymn that ended centuries ago. Like the ocean still tasting of salt even after the storm is gone. You rise, not because you're ready, because the story requires it. The chamber narrows behind you, the stone passage curling like a seashell. Every step you take is cushioned by sand that wasn't there a moment ago. Your feet don't leave prints. Your breath doesn't make steam. And then, the air shifts. There's light ahead, but it's not sunlight. It's firelight. You step into a new space, a long hall, low-ceilinged, smoke-smeared, lined with iron sconces and damp tapestries so ancient they've started to resemble moss. Everything in here smells of damp wool and the kind of mildew that only grows on history. You recognize it. You've never seen it before, but you recognize it. This is a monastic scriptorium, deep in the bones of a fortress that no longer exists on any map, where parchment was once made from the stretched skins of sheep that watched the sea too long. There are bells here, too, not hanging, buried. You see them lining the walls like ribs, half-formed, unfinished, hunched on wooden racks. Tools lie nearby, molds, hammers, wax-stained measurements. The smell of molten metal lingers, even though the forge hasn't been lit in centuries. You step forward. You run your hand along one of the unfinished bells. It trembles, just slightly. You pause, and then, from the shadows, a voice. They didn't let us finish them. It's soft, dusty, almost embarrassed to be speaking aloud. You turn. An old man stands at the far end of the hall, robes like curtains, beard like twisted candle wax, eyes like the sea after it swallowed too many truths. You don't ask who he is, because you know, he was the bell maker, the one tasked with casting the 10th bell before the sea came. They feared it, he continues. The 10th, said it would bring the flood, said it would break the sky. You nod, because it did, but not like they thought. So they ordered it buried. He gestures to the floor, and you realize the path you walked on. It's not stone, it's bell metal. The unfinished bell was never lifted. It became the floor of the hall. They made it walkable so no one could ever ring it again. You stare at your feet, and you understand. You've been carrying the bell with you this whole time. Not in your hands, in your steps. Every place you've walked has heard it. Every footprint a resonance. You look up. The bellmaker is watching you with tired relief. I thought I failed, he says. But it turns out, I simply made a bell that had to be rung with footsteps instead of ropes. You smile, because that's how this has always worked. Not with force, with presence. You don't need to strike the world. You just need to walk through it, remembering. The old man fades. The hall does too. And now you're walking through the marshes again. But they've changed. The sheep are gone. The statues are different. No longer screaming. Now they sing. Low, wordless, like humming from stone lungs. The air around them is warmer now. The sky is gray, but it isn't pressing down anymore. It just hovers, like it's curious. The tide is rising again, but not in threat, in response. You step into it. Let the water reach your knees, then your waist, then your chest. You close your eyes, and you listen to the last of the unfinished bells, to the silence of the glass, to the footprints that brought you here. And then, just beneath the surface, you hear a new note, not from the past, from the future. It's faint, young, still learning its tone, but it's there, waiting to be answered. You smile and whisper, I'm listening. You don't float. You sink gently, not like drowning, like descending into memory. The water isn't cold. is heavy. It folds around you like velvet, like the weight of too many lullabies sung at once. Your eyes stay open, because closing them would mean you're still trying to separate yourself from it all. And by now, you've learned there is no separation. The water is part of you. You are part of the bell. The bell is part of the silence. And the silence is awake. As you drift downward, the sea rearranges itself. First come the shadows, soft and slow, like thoughts you almost forgot to think. Then the shimmer, faint lights drifting past you, little globes of song suspended in brine. They pulse as you pass, responding to your breath. Each one holds a memory, but they're not yours. Not yet. You reach out. One floats into your palm. It flickers, and in a breath, you're standing in a church. But not just any church. It's Rungholt, before the sea, before the bells, before the forgetting. The roof leaks in two places. The pews are carved with initials, some from lovers, some from priests. The candles drip onto the stone floor in time with the ticking of a clock no one can see. And in the front pew, a woman, old, stern, spine straight like a sword that refuses to rust. She's humming, not a hymn, a warning. You step closer. She doesn't turn, but she speaks. We kept the bell hidden beneath the altar, wrapped it in linen soaked with oil and soot, but it still sang. You pause. You know this story, not from books, from blood. They said the 10th bell would summon angels, she continues. They didn't ask what kind. And then she looks at you, and you see, she has your eyes, but not the way a mirror does. The way a memory does, when it finally confesses it was never just a dream. She stands. She's holding a candle. Not wax, salt. She presses it into your hands. It burns, but not painfully. It feels like forgetting something painful and replacing it with a story instead. You blink, and you're back underwater, still holding the candle, still surrounded by drifting memories. The others begin to move toward you. One by one, they drift into your orbit. Memories shaped like a bell tower swallowed by ivy, a choir of children singing notes not meant for lungs, a clergyman scribbling hymns in a language no one alive speaks anymore, a cat sleeping beside a cracked bell, purring in rhythm with some ancient pulse. Each memory greets you, not with sound, with recognition. They orbit you like you're a planet rediscovered by its moons. And somewhere deep in the sea's endless body, something shifts. The earth moves, just a little, enough to remind you, this isn't just dreaming, this is resurfacing. Below you, a shape is rising. Stone, familiar, takes you a breath to name it. The Rungholt bell tower, but not broken, not rusted, reassembled, rising through the water like a spine stretching after a 1,000-year nap. You descend further, toward the top, toward where the last bell used to hang. There's no bell there now, just a place, a silence with a shape, waiting for someone to fill it. You land softly. The tower hums beneath your feet, and without thinking, you reach into your chest, and you remove it. The sound, the 10th resonance, the song you've been holding since your first sleepwalk through the flats. It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. You place it where the bell should be, and the sea stops. Everything holds its breath. The tide, the wind, even your heartbeat. And in that stillness, a note, not sung, not struck, just present. So deep it doesn't pass through your ears. It rearranges your bones. And you hear, we remember, we remember, we remember. Not a chant, a return. Rungholt isn't coming back from the sea. The sea is coming back from Rungholt. You stand at the top of the bell tower, or maybe you float. It's hard to tell anymore. now that gravity behaves more like an opinion and less like a law. The sea around you is no longer water, not exactly. Feels denser, but also thinner, like silk soaked in memory. Like the world has decided to stop pretending and finally admit it's made of ghosts. Below you, the city moves, not suddenly, but inevitably. Streets reassemble themselves from coral and barnacle. Walls breathe silt and exhale stone. Roofs stretch out of the sediment like flowers too polite to bloom all at once. A tower unfurls like a spine. A spire realigns itself toward a sky that still isn't sure whether it wants to be sea or cloud. You feel it in your ribs. Rungholt is rising, but not as it was. Not just cobbles and walls and storm-soaked memories. Not a carbon copy from some forgotten prayer book. This city is new, or rather renewed, brought back with awareness. Not to be reclaimed, to be remembered correctly, because the last time it rose, it was buried under myth, plague, punishment, hubris, the stories men told to keep themselves safe from the truth. That some cities drown on purpose, that some bells ring only once, and that some memories are too important to die cleanly. You step forward. The tower beneath you holds steady, but only just. It knows it isn't finished yet. It's waiting for you to bring the rest of yourself into place. You walk down a spiral staircase that didn't exist moments ago. The steps are carved with names. You recognize all of them, not because you read them in a book, because you carried them here. Each one is a voice, a bell, a person who heard the call and answered, in their own way. The teenage boy in Norway who sleep-talked in Middle Low German. The grandmother in Brittany who hummed forgotten melodies while hanging wet sheets. The baritone radio host who, once, without explanation, rang a wineglass on air until it cracked. They were all called. You were just the one who walked the whole way. And now you understand why. You weren't supposed to find Rungholt. You were supposed to become it. You step out into the street. The water is gone. Not because it receded, because it transformed. What surrounds you now is a kind of atmosphere, buoyant, heavy with salt and light and the pressure of centuries. The city is full of people, not citizens, not ghosts, not even reflections. They're echoes, all the versions of this place that ever were, layered like transparent sheets of music. Children from 1345 skipping past scholars from 1912. Priests from the 15th century nodding at divers from the 1980s. You walking past yourself in 5 other dreams you haven't had yet. And all of them are heading toward the same place. The center. The heart of Rungholt. The square. You follow. Because of course you do. Because even if you didn't want to, the city would carry you there like a tide carries driftwood. The square opens up before you. It looks like a bowl carved deep into the city's chest. And at its center, a new bell, not brass, not glass, not any metal known to maps or museums. It's made of silence. You can see it barely. A shimmer, a void shaped like a bell, floating 2 feet off the ground, turning ever so slightly with a breeze that doesn't exist. Everyone surrounds it. No one touches it. No one needs to, because it's already ringing. The sound doesn't come from it. It comes from you, from your lungs, from your skin, from that slow pulse between your ears that began the moment you stepped onto the tidal flats and heard the ground hum beneath your soles. You close your eyes, and when you open them again, the bell is inside you, not metaphorically, not spiritually, physically. You are the final instrument, not to be used, to be kept. And now, finally, you realize all of this wasn't about finding Rungholt. It was about preparing you to leave it again, to walk back into a world that will still refuse to believe it ever existed, to carry its sound quietly, patiently, into places where silence has grown too heavy. You breathe, and the bell rings, once, softly, and every person in the square bows their head. You do too, because some silences aren't endings. They're oaths. You don't walk back. There's no path, just a feeling, like the memory of a staircase beneath your feet as you descend in the dark. One step, another, no lantern, no map, just pull. The silence inside you becomes a guide, not a voice. Compass. North? No. Deeper? Yes. You follow it not with purpose but with permission. The city of Rungholt dims behind you. It doesn't vanish. It recedes, like a tide refusing to close the door entirely. You sense it folding itself into the folds of reality again, becoming suggestion, rumor, myth, which is just the polite word for truth that refuses to conform. Above you, the water thickens again. Not dangerously, protectively. You rise, like breath returning to the surface. Your lungs ache, not for air, but for noise. Real-world noise. The hum of fluorescent lights. The distant whoosh of traffic. The sharp beep of a microwave you forgot you left running. The sounds of a life that once felt small, but now feel sharp, bright, even holy. You burst through the surface. Not dramatically, just naturally, like coming home after a long walk in the rain. The sea is calm, gray sky, gentle waves, the sound of gulls complaining about something trivial. You're on the flats again, but the flats are different. You're not sure how. Everything looks the same. Wind-swept reeds, distant windmills, the creak of wood in the harbor. But you aren't the same. You walk, no hurry. The silence inside you doesn't press. It resonates. You pass the old cafe. It's open again. But the windows are darker, the inside less certain. You don't enter. You just keep moving. Every footprint you leave behind is faint. But they ring. Not audibly, subtly. You don't hear it. The world does. And the world reacts in small ways. A dog turns its head, confused, as you pass. A child stares at you and quietly starts to hum a tune she's never been taught. A man drops his phone while crossing the street, only to look up in time to avoid a truck he never saw coming. Nothing dramatic, nothing cinematic, just influence, soft adjustments. Your presence is like the tremor before a landslide, not destructive, preparatory. You sit on a bench, same one as before, still damp. Your fingers brush the wood. It's warm. Your phone buzzes. You check the screen. One notification from an app you didn't install. It reads, "Would you like to ring the bell again?" There's no button, no yes or no, just the message fading slowly. You don't reply, because you already did. That's what returning was. The ringing wasn't a moment. It was a choice. And now the bell rings inside you. With every breath, every blink, every dream. You sip coffee you don't remember ordering. It tastes like salt and honey and something older than both. You close your eyes for a moment, and in the quiet behind your thoughts, you hear someone else starting the walk. Not you, someone new. They'll think it's just a strange dream, or a song stuck in their head, or a compulsion to stand near shorelines and whisper names they don't remember learning. And then one day they'll find the flats. They'll see the shimmer. They'll step onto the road. And they'll feel it too, that hum beneath the earth. And they'll understand. They weren't the first. They won't be the last. But they are called. And the bell? It will welcome them as it welcomed you. No fanfare. No lightning. Just a silence so deep it feels like home. Night falls sideways. Not all at once. More like a curtain being tugged down by one corner. The shadows lengthen first. Then the sky deepens, not to black, but to that in-between color, what artists call blue hour, and what fishermen just call time to go home. But you don't go home. because you're already there. Somehow, somewhere. Even though you're sitting on a bench that's damp with salt, staring at an empty beach, you feel it. The bell inside you has settled. Not dormant, not done, just quiet, like a cat coiled in sleep, like an old song curled up in the back of your throat, not needing to be sung, just known. The city beneath the waves hums once, faintly. You feel it in your molars, and in that hum, a shape begins to form, not outside you, inside. A room you've never entered but always carried. It has no windows, but it isn't dark. It has no walls, but you feel safe inside it. It isn't in the sea. It isn't in the flats. It isn't in any time or place you could describe to someone else. It's in you. You close your eyes just to look at it. And when you do, you're there. The floor is smooth. Stone, wood, memory. It shifts slightly under your feet like it's breathing. In the center of the room, a basin, shallow, filled with water, the surface still. Above it hangs a bell, smaller than the others, delicate, fragile, made of something that might be crystal or bone or some sacred hybrid of both. It doesn't ring, but it reflects, not your face, not your past, your possibilities. You step forward and look into the basin. The water ripples just once, and you see a version of you who never left the shore, still waiting for something to make sense. A version who drowned, smiling, whispering thank you as the tide took you. A version who forgot it all, lived a normal life, and wakes up once a year from a dream of bells underwater. And then the ripple fades, and only one version remains. You, now, eyes wide, heart still, bell intact. And for the first time since your walk began, you feel tired. Not from pain, from fullness. Like your mind has eaten too much story. Like your breath has been holding meaning for too long. It's time to rest. So you lie down on the floor that isn't a floor, inside the room that isn't a room, beneath a bell that doesn't ring, because it doesn't need to. Its sound is already inside your chest, beating once for every memory the world tries to forget. You feel your limbs loosen, your pulse soften, your thoughts begin to fray at the edges. Somewhere, faintly, someone is walking. Their footsteps echo across the flats. You smile. You whisper to no one in particular, "It's your turn now," and then you close your eyes. Sleep doesn't come like a blanket, comes like a tide, slow, reluctant, curious. It laps at your mind in soft waves, questions rising and falling in no particular order. What time is it? What day is it? Were you ever really underwater? Why do your bones still ring when you lie still enough? You don't answer. You just float. Not in water now, but in memory. Memory so deep it becomes architecture. Rooms made from thoughts you never finished having. Hallways shaped from the curve of lullabies once hummed to you in languages you didn't yet understand. A staircase curls upward through the dark, spiraling like the inside of a bell. You take it, because that's what you do now. You ascend. Each step feels lighter than the last, like you're shedding layers that never really belong to you. Doubt, noise, the static of cities, the ache of forgetting. By the time you reach the top, you're weightless. Not metaphorically, actually. You drift into a chamber made of light and quiet and salt and song. No doors, no windows, just space, holding itself open for you the way a parent might hold a coat for a child who doesn't yet know it's cold outside. The bell is here too. Not any bell you've seen. Not brass, not glass, not silence. This one is made of breath. You can see it every time you exhale. You can feel it in the space between heartbeats. And suddenly, without warning, you remember, there was never just one bell. There were always 10,000, hidden in the seams of the world. One beneath the church floor in Bavaria, one in a mason jar buried in a Tennessee backyard, one carved into the dreams of a mute woman in Damascus who never stopped humming. You were just the one who answered yours. And now, because of that, you can hear them all. You sit in the light. You listen. And they come, one by one. The bell ringers, the sleepers, the wanderers, people like you who walked the flats when no one else saw the shimmer, who heard notes in the wind and followed them without asking for permission. They sit beside you, not in a circle, not in a line, in proximity, not close, not far, just near enough to feel known. They don't speak. They don't need to. You're part of the same song now. You rest your head on the floor made of dusk and melody. It rises slightly to meet you, like a tide eager to hold your weight. And from far away, maybe from the waking world, you hear a question. Did you sleep well? You smile not because of the question, but because of the truth inside it. You weren't sleeping. You were becoming. The dream ends, not with a jolt, but with a hush. And in that hush, a bell, not loud, just true. You awaken with salt on your lips, not the kind from tears, the kind left by oceans. And you don't remember swallowing any water, but your throat hums, faintly, like a tuning fork that forgot what it was vibrating for. Your body is still, but not paralyzed, just anchored. You are lying on something soft but uneven, sand, perhaps, or the worn boards of a pier long since forgotten by maps. The air smells of old rope, wet stone, and a kind of distant thunder that doesn't belong to the sky. You open your eyes. The world is dim, not night, not dawn, that blue, weightless in-between when the sea forgets which way is up. You sit. Around you, the flats. Again, but emptier now, not abandoned, cleared, like a stage after the audience leaves, or a cathedral between services. Only the bones remain, and those bones are yours to walk. You rise slowly. Your limbs feel different, not lighter, not heavier, rewritten. There's a rhythm in you now that wasn't there before. You don't walk, you resonate. Each step you take carries the weight of silence beneath it, not emptiness, intention. You pass a heron standing perfectly still in a tide pool. It doesn't startle, just turns one golden eye toward you, then back toward the horizon. It knows. Of course it knows. You're not the first it's seen. You won't be the last. The air shifts. Somewhere behind you, the wind whistles low through a hollow, carries a note so subtle you don't know if you heard it or just felt it inside your ribs. The 10th bell, still inside you, still waiting, not for orders, not for ritual, just for the next true moment. You keep walking. The landscape looks unchanged, but the shadows have grown respectful. The ground no longer pulls at you with questions. It remembers your answers. And yet, the world does not. People still walk these shores unaware. They sip coffee beside the marsh. They hang laundry that flutters beside runes they think are just decorative. They complain about the tide washing out the trail. They don't know, but you do. You're not angry at them for forgetting. You're simply present for what they've missed. You watch a woman toss a rock into the water. The splash is small, but the ripples go far. You don't need to explain to her what that means. You just nod and walk on. Eventually, you come to a place that looks familiar. A trailhead, a narrow lane of seagrass flattened just slightly by feet not your own. You kneel. You place your hand against the earth. It hums, only once, like a heartbeat, like a yes. The bell inside you does not ring. It doesn't need to, because it's awake now, and so are you. You sit on the edge of the flats. You breathe, and in your stillness you feel it. Others are coming, quietly, from elsewhere, not because you called them, because something in them resonated when you woke. Because the bell is no longer a thing to be found. It's a frequency, a way of seeing, a way of being. And now the world will begin to remember, slowly, subtly, one dreamwalker at a time. You close your eyes, just for a moment, just long enough to feel the tide kiss your boots. And in that silence, you wait, not for something to begin, but for someone to arrive. You hear them before you see them, not footsteps, lullabies, fragments of songs hummed from throats still unsure whether they're dreaming. The kind of melodies sung under breath in kitchens and caves, in boats with holes and beds with too many blankets. Songs that weren't taught, songs that arrived. The notes drift across the flats like fog, and through it they come, one by one, some barefoot, still wiping sleep from their eyes, some clutching journals or compasses or relics they don't know how they acquired. All of them with that look, the look you once wore, half wonder, half suspicion, the deep animal instinct that says something is not quite real, and the even deeper knowledge that this is more real than anything else ever was. You don't speak, not yet. You simply rise, and they notice. They gather around you not in worship, not in curiosity, in recognition. One of them steps forward. She's about 17, hair tangled from sleep, salt on her shirt sleeve. She looks at you and says, "I heard it. I don't know how, but I followed it." You nod. Another, older, eyes like winter, is holding a stone wrapped in seaweed. He holds it out. "This used to be a bell," he says. "Didn't it?" You don't answer. Not because you can't, because the answer has already shaped itself in the space between you. They don't need proof. They need direction. So you walk, and they follow, across the flats, past the hollow tree with rust in its bark, past the sandbar where the birds never land, past the place where you once heard your name in the wind. You lead them to the shallow, flooded dip in the marsh, just a soft hollow where the ground sags like a held breath. You kneel. You place your hand on the surface, and wait. One by one, they kneel too. No instruction, just instinct. And together, without plan or ritual, you breathe in, slow, united, and the water begins to shimmer, not ripple, shimmer, like light passing through something that isn't quite water anymore. And beneath the shimmer, they see it, just a glimpse, a curve of stone, a brass edge, a shimmer of a forgotten spire, the top of a bell tower. The new ones gasp. They look at you, some with wonder, some with fear. One, a child, simply says, "I remember this." And in that moment, they all do. Not the facts, not the story, just the pull, the silence that shaped them before they had words to notice it. And now it's awake in them. You don't lead them into the water. You don't need to. You've done your part. The bell inside you quiets. Satisfied, the girl steps forward. She reaches into the water, into the shimmer, into the shape of the city, and she pulls back a note. Not ink, not parchment, a sound, held in her palm like a petal of vibration. She holds it up, and you see it's hers, her resonance, her frequency, her piece of the story, and the others begin to do the same. Some weep, some laugh, some just hold their notes close to their hearts. You step back, because this isn't your part anymore. You were the bell bearer. Now you're the witness. The city doesn't rise this time. It multiplies. In each of them, one bell becomes 12. 12 become dozens. And soon, the flats hum with quiet energy, like a choir warming up. But no one sings. They don't need to, because the song is them. You feel the wind change. A last signal. Your part is complete. You turn. You walk alone. And behind you the flats bloom, not with flowers, with soundless music, with memory, with purpose. The next dream has already begun. You walk until the flats give way to fog. Not mist, fog, thick and slow, like breath from the mouth of something ancient. It curls around your shoulders, parts for your steps, but never fully retreats. The ground beneath you softens. Not mud, not sand, something older, something the sea doesn't speak about. The silence in you begins to shift. It's not nervous, it's preparing. Your part is ending. You feel it in the ache behind your eyes, in the way your bones settle slightly with each breath. You've walked the path, carried the bell, witnessed the new echoes begin to stir. And now, like all things true and sacred, your time bends toward stillness. Ahead, a light, faint, flickering, not fire. A window. You approach a structure. It doesn't look like much, just a crooked cottage nestled in the fog, the kind that only appears in stories told by grandmothers with careful eyes. Moss covers the roof. The door is slightly ajar. A lantern swings in the window, but the light it gives off isn't yellow. It's blue. You open the door. It doesn't creak, because it was waiting. Inside, the room is small. One chair, one shelf, one bed. The bed is made. Of course it is. There's a basin beside it. You touch the water. Warm. Not from fire. From memory. You glance at the shelf. A single object sits there. A bell. Your bell. But it's not inside you anymore. It's resting here. Peace. Not forgotten. Just completed. You sit on the bed. It sighs under your weight like it remembers you from another lifetime. You lie down, not out of exhaustion, out of honor, because the journey deserves a proper ending, because Rungholt deserves a keeper who knows when to let go. You pull the blanket over your shoulders. It's heavier than you expect, woven from echoes, lined with silence. You close your eyes, and the fog moves through the room like a lullaby given shape. Somewhere in the distance, one last bell chimes. Not for warning, not for alarm, for closure, for remembrance. And you think of the others, the girl who hummed, the man with the seaweed bell, the ones who will come after, the ones who won't know why they wake up crying near oceans they've never seen. You want to whisper something to them, a last message, but it's already there, in the hush between your breaths, in the warm press of the blanket, in the floor beneath the cottage, where the sea hums in its sleep. You don't need to say it, because they'll hear it, one day, when they're ready, when the silence finds them, when the bell rings once, deep in their chest, and the world finally begins to soften. You smile, and in that smile, the city sleeps. The bed beneath you doesn't move. The house doesn't breathe. Even the fog outside has settled. All the world has gone still, not empty, but full of pause. The kind of pause that happens right before the last candle burns out. Not with a hiss, but with a sigh. Your fingers loosen. Your chest rises, then falls, then stays, for a moment, at the bottom of the breath, like it's listening for something beneath the world. And there it is. Not a bell, not a voice, not even a thought, just a presence. Like the sea brushing the edge of your dream, gently reminding you were never walking alone, that every step you took across the flats, someone walked beside you. Perhaps not in flesh, but in memory. They still are. You're not gone. You're simply resting. You've left a trail not of words, not of relics, but of resonance. In every city that listens closely, there will be a moment, just before the wind shifts, just after the lights flicker, when a person will pause and say, "Did you hear that?" They won't know it was you. They don't need to. They only need to wonder. And in that wondering, Rungholt rises again. You're sinking now, not into water, but into stillness. The kind of quiet that no longer demands answers. the kind that doesn't need to be understood to be true. Your final breath slips from your lips like a prayer without words. No fear, no regret, just the hush of someone who finally, gently remembers. And as your thoughts blur and the bell inside you fades to a distant warmth, a whisper stirs the room like a breeze made of velvet. Sleep now. The sea is watching. The silence is whole.